Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All praise due to Allah alone. We praise Him and we seek His help. Whomsoever Allah guides is a truly guided one, and whomsoever Allah leaves astray, none can show him guidance. May the best peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. My dear viewers, welcome to another edition of your program Fatawa. The first question we have in today's episode is concerning something that we sometimes experience, which is whenever we see somebody out of forgetfulness eating or drinking during Ramadan, what shall I do as an observance? Shall I let him finish? Shall I say, this is a gift from Allah and I should not interrupt him, or shall I intervene and I remind him? First of all, we are required to have what is known as husnul dhann. Husnul dhann means to expect good from others and to think good of others as well. So if you see somebody who is either eating or drinking during the daytime of Ramadan, before judging him that he is breaking his fast and he is a sinner, it is possible that this person may have eaten or drinking, may have been eating or drinking out of forgetfulness. So I shall begin by, hey brother, remember we're fasting today. It is true that the Prophet ﷺ said in the sound hadith, من نسي وهو صائم فأكل أو شرب فليتم صومه فإنما أطعمه الله وسقاه. Which means, whoever forgets while fasting and he eats and drinks, let him resume fasting, because his other eating or drinking is a gift from Allah, but his fasting is still valid. Just resume, and you don't have to make up this day, because it was due to forgetfulness. Allah the Almighty says in Surah Al-Baqarah, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. So He inspired us to invoke Him with this marvelous dua. Our Lord, do not hold us accountable if we ever forget or we commit sins by mistake. So, if anything is done by mistake or out of forgetfulness, it is pardoned by Allah the Almighty and it doesn't have any consequences. The person simply needs to say Astaghfirullah and resume. In this case, the person doesn't know, but you know. So instead of thinking, look at him, he is breaking his fast of Ramadan, how cruel, how rebellious, assume that he did this out of forgetfulness. And we have seen this a lot. And it happens sometimes with us. We're all human beings. We have the tendency to forget. We're called insan, which is derived from nisyan, forgetfulness. It's a human nature. So because of that, it is now your duty to remind him kindly or her kindly that remember, we're fasting today. If you don't, you're blameworthy, because in his right, in her right, maybe they are doing this out of forgetfulness, they are pardoned. But concerning you, it is your duty to enjoin what is good and to forbid what is bad. So if the person is eating or drinking in front of you, number one, assume that they have forgotten. Number two, take the initiative to remind them today is Ramadan and everybody is fasting. Have you forgotten? And so on. The following question is concerning a pregnant woman during Ramadan. What is the preference for a pregnant woman, to fast or to break her fast? In the ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah the Almighty prescribed fasting, He also said, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. And for those who can fast but with hardship, let them give instead a fidya, a ransom, to feed one poor person per each day they skip its fasting during Ramadan. Abdullah ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him and his father, Tarjuman al-Quran, said this ayah was initially revealed concerning the old man and woman. They are also addressed by the command of Allah of fasting. So they may fast, but it burdens them. They're too old. So Allah Almighty gave them the alternative that was in the beginning, in the early stages of the legislation of fasting. So in this case, they can break their fast and they feed one miskin. Then he also said the breastfeeding woman and the pregnant woman, if they fear their babies may be affected by their fasting, lack of water, maybe getting dehydrated, then they also are allowed to break their fast and they can feed one miskin per each day they skip its fasting. This is the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas. May Allah be pleased with him and his father. Now, further explanation. A pregnant woman has either one of two conditions. Either she is healthy, capable to fast, and fasting doesn't burden her, she doesn't feel dizzy, she can do her regular daily routine without really feeling that she's fainting or that some bad would happen to her. In this case, she should observe fasting. So being pregnant does not automatically give you the concession to break your fast. Being breastfeeding woman does not automatically give you the license and the concession to skip fasting. No. Rather, it depends on your condition. An old man, an old woman, a pregnant woman, and a breastfeeding woman, likewise. Similarly, not every sickness gives you the concession to break your fast. Allah the Almighty says, مَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So this ayah prescribed that if you happen to be sick and or you happen to be traveling, then you are permitted not to fast, to skip fasting. Even if you started during the day fasting, then you feel like you have to take your medication. It depends on what kind of sickness. If it is something severe, you cannot tolerate, break your fast, take your medication, and make up that day, as the ayah says by the end. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. How many days you skip fasting? 3, 4, 5? You can make them after Ramadan in Shawwal, in the Qa'dah, in the Hijjah, all the way until the end of Sha'ban of the next year. But you should do it, you should make it up. All the days which you have missed, you should make them up before the following Ramadan. If the woman is healthy, she should continue fasting. But if the woman is weak and she cannot fast, or the doctor says it is very risky, I order you not to fast for the sake of your baby, the fetus, the baby whom you're breastfeeding, and all of that. She is having problem breastfeeding the baby. There is no milk because she's not having liquids during the daytime. In this case, for this reason or the reason, whether it's because of the baby, the fetus, or because of the woman herself is weak, she's permitted to skip fasting. And in this case, the ayah says, عِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. This is ayah number 184 of Surah Al-Baqarah. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. This is the opinion of the vast majority of the fuqaha, including the companions, at-tabi'een, and the successors of the Muslim jurists. The following question is, excuse me. One sister says that she used not to fast during the days of her menses, and she did not know that she's supposed to make up those days. What does she have to do? Especially now she grew old, she's kind of sick, she's diabetic and hypertensive, and with all of that, fasting is a troublesome for her. With regards to menstruated women, or women who are experiencing the bleeding after the delivery, she shouldn't fast, she shouldn't pray, and she shouldn't have sexual relations while having the menses or the bleeding. Why? Because this is a source of sickness, and Allah the Almighty gave her the concession. It's not just a concession. It is forbidden to fast while you're having the menses. It is forbidden to pray while having the menses. But look at this difference between offering the prayers versus offering the fasting. In the case of the prayers, a menstruated woman doesn't have to make up any missed prayer. 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, she doesn't have to make up the missed days. And this is a mercy from Allah. And as far as for fasting, she has to make up those missed days. When you have somebody who says, I didn't know, this is problematic. Muslims must learn how to worship their Creator, because we as believers who submit ourselves to the will of Allah the Almighty, we should learn how to worship Allah the Almighty. This is the main purpose that Allah the Almighty created all of us for. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I haven't created both jinn kind and ins kind, human beings, but to worship me. That is the purpose. So life is a big test, and Allah the Almighty commanded the worship in order to test the believer's compliance, and so on. So it isn't sufficient to say that I didn't know that I'm supposed to perform wudu before each prayer, or I didn't know that I have to pray each prayer on its fixed time. This is what is called مَعْلُومٌ مِّنَ الدِّينِ بِالضَّرُورَةِ. It is a necessary knowledge for every average and ordinary Muslim. Every person must learn. And no one will be given the benefit of doubt as to say, oh, well, I didn't know, then you don't have to worry about the past. No. You will have to make up those missed days for years. 1, 2, 3, or 4 Ramadans, you didn't know that, and you missed so many days of fasting due to the menses, you have to make them up. Aisha radiyallahu anha, the mother of the believers, said, and the hadith is collected by Imam Muslim in his sound collection, that كنا نؤمر بقضاء الصوم ولا نؤمر بقضاء الصلاة. Whenever we have the menses, we were commanded to make up the missed fasting, but not to make up the missed prayers. And as I said, it should be made up before the following Ramadan. You have like 11 months. You can make them up at any time. There are only 6 or 7 days. You can fast them consecutively if you want to. You can fast them every other day. Spread them all over the 11 months, even if you just postpone them until the last month, which is the month of Sha'ban. But the preference is to make them up as soon as possible. Why? Look, our sister here says that now I grew old and I cannot fast. A woman is subject to get pregnant, to breastfeeding. So because of that, the sooner is the better. What if the woman is having a condition like our sister now? Then she will be given the hukm, the ruling of a person who is chronically ill. The earlier hukm in 184 of Surah Al-Baqarah, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. This is concerning a person whose sickness is temporary or acute. But once he recovers, once she recovers, once they return home, they must make up those missed days. What about a person who is now chronically ill? We know that may Allah give shifa to all those who are sick. People live with liver problems, liver cirrhosis, kidney failure, renal failure. They have to do renal dialysis. They have severe hyper or hypotension and all of that, diabetes. So it is not expected for them to recover. In this case, the alternative will go back to the previous hukm, which is al-fidya, which is the ransom. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُنَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٌ, to feed one poor person per each day. Let me add to that, what if, subhanallah, some cases, they thought that's it. You know, I'm drawing near my end. But by the leave of Allah, they get healthy, they recover, they become better, and they don't need any medication anymore. What is the condition in this case? The condition is, have you paid the fidya for the past days? You don't have to make them up any day. And then we deal with the future. based on your health condition. You're healthy now. Some people who are diabetic and hypertensive and all of that, so they did the stomach bypass. They did whatever operation in order to shrink the size of the stomach. And they recover. I've known many people that said, I don't have to take diabetes medication anymore, and the medication for the hypertension. They look better, they feel healthier. Now, can you fast? Yeah, then you must fast. So the hukm changes based on the condition of the person. The following question is concerning the miscarriage and fasting. If a woman happened to experience, a pregnant woman happened to have miscarriage 2 months after conception. In this case, we look into the miscarried fetus. If the miscarriage resulted in bringing about a fetus that have figures like arms, legs, head, nose, ears, and you can recognize that even though it's very little. In this case, we call it mukhallaq. Mukhallaq means he was almost being to be created like a human being. Normally, that takes about 81 days. If this is the case, then the bleeding after the miscarriage is nifas, which is a blood that prevents a woman from praying, from fasting, from having sexual relations, because it is similar to the menses. How long does it take? It takes normally up to 40 days. But if it ceases even in a few days, then perform ghusl. And depending on your health condition, can you fast? Fast. With regards to the prayer, you must observe the prayers on regular basis. Why? Because you are in a state of purity. As I said, that the least time that you can recognize the image of a fetus having arms, legs, head, and ears and nose is about 81 days. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to what is best and teach us what we don't know. Inshallah, we'll take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. The first question in this segment is from one sister who says, normally after the menses I take a bath, but maybe next day I see some discharge, color discharge. So would that be considered a continuation of the menses, and would that prevent me from praying and would invalidate my fasting? This is what is known in the fiqh as al-kudratu wal-sufra, and there is a specific hadith in this regard. Atiyah, may Allah be pleased with her, narrated that كنا لا نعد الكدرة والصفرة بعد الطهر شيئا. We used to disregard any brownish or yellowish discharge as long as that happens after experiencing the cleanness, the discontinuation of the bleeding of the menses. So a while later, if there is some slight discharge, yellowish, brownish, that is dismissed. But the person, the sister, has to wash the orifice and have to perform wudu for the salah upon experiencing that. Obviously, if it is continuous, then she must do that with every prayer time, once the prayer time has entered, not before. So this discharge invalidates the prayer, but it is not impure. It is not impure. It is coming from the uterus and is not coming from the bladder, so that's why it is not impure. If ever it turns into excuse me, if it ever turns into another bleeding, if the gap between the period and this bleeding was short, then it must be also relating to the period. So you should resume not fasting and not praying. You make up the fasting later on. Sometimes a sister may experience the period for the regular number of days, 7 days, 8 days. Then after it ceases and she sees the white discharge or the clear discharge, the transparent discharge, she performs ghusl and she resumes her regular activities as far as the prayers and fasting and even having a complete intimate relationship with her spouse. Then a while later, maybe a bleeding would start. Now the sister will be the best person to tell whether this is relating to the period or whether it is an irregular bleeding. What difference does it make? It makes all the difference. As far as for the irregular bleeding, maybe due to sickness, maybe due to psychological stress or emotional stress or physical exercise or heavy work, that would lead to an irregular bleeding due to sickness, not to the period or the menses. The color of the blood, the physical characteristics of the odor and the color do not match those of the regular period. In this case, that would be called in fiqh istihada. The first one, the period, is known as hayd. It prevents the woman who's having hayd, the monthly period, from praying, from fasting, from touching the Quran with bare hands, from entering the masjid, and also from having a complete sexual intercourse. Normally, I like to use, a camouflage word when I say an intimate relationship or sexual relations. But in fact, we all know that it covers everything: kissing, hugging, cuddling, and it does not necessarily mean having sexual intercourse. But what is forbidden during the menses is the complete sexual intercourse. Mere kissing and hugging and sleeping together on the same bed, even in the nude, as long as the private part is covered and as long as you avoid having the complete intercourse, that is permissible. It has been narrated by the mother of the believers that whenever any of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ would have her menses, he would order her to wear an izar. Al-izar is the lower sheet that a person, whether he or she, normally wear around the waist and down. That's called izar, similar to what we wear in Hajj. Then they can enjoy the upper part, hugging and cuddling and all of that, and kissing. That is permissible. And it is very interesting that the mothers of the believers 1400 years ago have narrated that, because the ummah need to learn about that. Our wives, our sisters, our daughters, our mothers, they need to learn about that. So having those wives of the Prophet ﷺ sharing with us the very private and intimate relationship in a very legitimate way, in order to show us what is lawful and what is not lawful in this regard, is such a great blessing, brothers and sisters. So excuse me if every once in a while I will just use the professional term in order to explain to the viewers what I mean by having mentioning the term jima', while having the menses, no jima'. Now, what about during al-istihada, which is the irregular bleeding? The irregular bleeding should not prevent the woman who is having this istihada from praying, from fasting, from entering the masjid, from reciting Quran and touching the Quran with bare hands, and if they take precautions, even having an intimate relationship. Okay, but how would she pray? After performing ghusl, if this irregular bleeding is continuous, once the time of each prayer has entered, you make wudu. Obviously, we do first istinja, washing the private, wearing the pad, make wudu, and pray the current prayer. With this wudu, even if there is a blood flow or dripping, and with this wudu, you're allowed to pray all the relating nawafil. I mean, the prescribed sunan before or after the prayers. You want to pray istikhara, you want to pray tahiyatul masjid, you want to pray 2 rak'ahs for whatever reason, no problem. But whenever it is the time of the next fard prayer, obligatory prayer, you will be required to perform wudu again after the time has entered, and so on. There is another question about the preference for a pregnant woman, whether to fast or not to fast. And I would like to emphasize what we have mentioned earlier. You know, the ayah 185, it is still in the course of fasting of Surah Al-Baqarah. In this ayah, Allah the Almighty says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرِ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرِ وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. This ayah explains in brief our religion and what Allah wants from us and what Allah wants for us. He wishes for us ease, not hardship. He wants to give you yusr, ease. He doesn't want to make things difficult for you. So don't make it difficult upon yourselves, especially when it comes to the worship, so that you don't hate it. It doesn't bore you. You should not feel like it's a heavy burden that you have to do it and you don't have heart for it. No, you should rather enjoy it. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرِ. So He prescribed for you skipping fasting if you encounter difficulty, if it burdens you, if you're traveling, if you're sick, if you're pregnant and you feel dizzy, and if you're breastfeeding and you feel tired, and you don't have to wait until you faint. You don't have to wait until you fall down. If you think, or if your doctor prescribes for you, you should break your fast, enjoy this concession, and you shall make it up some other time. So this is like the determining factor when the person keeps in mind, same like for the traveler, in Ramadan particularly. Nowadays, if I'm traveling business class, first class, enjoying the lounge, and the journey is not really a big deal. And anyway, once I get on board, I lie down, I fall asleep, even though it's 5 hours, 9 hours, I just get up. I normally don't eat. Enjoy fasting, because you are going to make up this day anyway. But if you decide, should you decide to break your fast, that is your call. You're having this concession 100%. You are having migraine, God forbid, that is splitting your head into half. You're hitting your head against the wall. Don't do that. Take your medication, break your fast, and in this case you're allowed to eat and drink, and resume eating and drinking. Allah gave you the concession. So sister, if you are pregnant, I personally know many sisters, during their pregnancy, they have observed fasting throughout the whole month of Ramadan. They didn't have any problem with that. Maybe just a little bit of dizziness, and occasionally, not on regular basis. And when people say, you can break your fast, I'm okay. And she's cooking and she's fixing the house and all of that, no problem. Should you ever feel that is affecting your health and it is weakening you and it may affect your pregnancy or breastfeeding, or the doctor orders you to break your fast, enjoy it, but you will have to make up that missed fasting, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ in the hadith said, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْبِرِّ الصَّوْمُ فِي السَّفَرِ. Righteousness is not to observe fasting while traveling. Traveling back then was seriously troublesome. On the back of the camel, walking, jogging, carrying loads, you know, it's really troublesome. Okay, this is for the voluntary fasting. You shouldn't be fasting while traveling. But if it is mandatory fasting, such as a Ramadan, you have the choice. It is recommended, and there is a difference of opinion between the scholars with regards to the preference. Is it better to break your fast and enjoy the concession, or is it better to resume fasting? The summary is, you are the decision maker in this regard. It's like any regular day. As a matter of fact, I'm not doing anything. I'm just lying down in my seat, which turns into bed. So I'm not encountering any problem. I like to fast. It doesn't burden me. Fast, no problem. Okay? So in this case, that will be preferable for you. You decide the preference. But you don't sit in the flight and you're starving and everybody's eating next to you and you're very thirsty and you're coughing and you encounter difficulty. Then you are, once you get off, He will take a car or a cab, go through the immigration to go to do the Umrah, and it's troublesome. Eat and drink. Strengthen yourself by the means of provision as Allah the Almighty allowed you. So here, by analogy, we talk about these sisters who are either pregnant or breastfeeding. Look what Aisha radiallahu anha narrated in the sound hadith, which is collected by both great Imams Bukhari and Muslim. ما خير رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بين أمرين إلا اختار أيسرهما ما لم يكن إثما. Not even once, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the choice between two options, but he would always choose the one which is easier. أيسرهما, provided it is not a sin. You don't say, oh, I had the choice to eat or not to eat in Ramadan, and you're healthy and you're resident. I would choose the one which is better for me. I like to eat. I don't like to fast. That's that's a sin. I don't like to pray, so I would choose not to pray. No. Once you submit yourself to Allah and you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, you acknowledge that you are His servant and you must fulfill all His commands and His obligations. The extra nawafil are optional. In the hadith, Allah the Almighty says, ما تقرب إلي عبدي بشيء أحب إلي مما افترضته عليه. There is nothing that my servant can do to come close to me and become near to me better than fulfilling what I have commanded on him to fulfill. That is the 5 daily prayers. That is fasting during the month of Ramadan, if you're resident and if you're not sick. That is giving you zakah, the very small rate of zakah, as going for Hajj or Umrah once in your lifetime. That's simple. Somebody having access to do more. Listen to this. Allah the Almighty said in the sacred hadith, and my servant will continue to draw closer and closer to me through offering the supererogatory acts of worship until I love him. So those extra acts of worship, nawafil, are means of bringing you closer and closer to Allah. What is the purpose of getting closer to Allah? To be loved by Him. And then what? What happens when you become loved by Allah? فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُ, and once I love Him, I become His hearing with which He hears, His sight with which He sees, His hands, His feet. And if He were to ask me of anything, I shall deliver it. If He were to seek forgiveness, I shall forgive him. If He seeks protection in me, I shall grant Him protection. Why? Because He loves you. So we're doing these acts of worship, even the extra acts of worship, to be loved by Allah the Almighty. And once you're loved by Allah, you're saved, both in this life and in the hereafter. So the decision maker is you. You are in a condition where you feel, I can do it, and it doesn't burden me. Enjoy it. Especially when you know that for certain you will have to make up this day or those days. So anyway, I'm going to fast them, I'm going to make them up. I would rather do it now, especially because of the greatness and the virtues of the time. It's such a precious time, Ramadan. But you're weak, you're tired, you're having this fatigue which may affect your health or your baby. Break your fast immediately and enjoy this concession and make it up, inshallah, when you deliver your baby and once you are capable. May Allah make it easy for all of us to comprehend His deen and do what is best. We'll take a short break and we'll be back, inshallah, in a few minutes. Please stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the last segment in today's program, Fatawa. The first question we have in this segment is from one sister who says that a few minutes before Fajr, so she assumed that she is pure from her menses, so she performed ghusl and she prayed Fajr and she intended fasting. Then during the day she has seen the blood one more time. What shall she do, and whether her prayers is valid or the prayer that she offered is valid and the fasting will be valid or not? Number one, with regards to the sisters who experience their menses, they shouldn't rush to jump into conclusion. I think normally it is 7 days, so that is the 7th, it should be okay. No. That is something that you have to verify on your own, and every woman knows how to verify that, especially either due to the dryness of the source of the blood, so there are no traces of blood anymore, or due to after ceasing the bleeding, there will be a wide discharge or a clear discharge that is coming from the uterus, which indicates that now you are in a state of complete tahara. If this is the case, even if it is just 1 minute before Fajr and you didn't have to perform, you didn't have a chance to perform ghusl, for fasting does not require the tahara, yani does not require you to perform the ghusl or take the bath in order to remove the major impurity. What matters is your intention, and you witness fasting while in a state of tahara. You are not experiencing the menses. So if this is the case, fasting is valid. If it is just 1 minute, 1 minute before the dawn, before you heard the adhan, then afterward you can perform your ghusl to lift the major impurities, and now you can pray Fajr. Obviously, it is recommended to do that as soon as possible so that you pray Fajr before sunrise, because the time is very short between dawn and sunrise. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's more or less in some countries. So that's why you should take advantage and perform ghusl immediately and pray Fajr. But as far as fasting, once you recognize that you are in a state of tahara, you should assume the intention of fasting. If, on the other hand, during the day, you realize that the bleeding has come back, in this case, that is a part of the period, and it was not over yet. So in this case, the prayer which you have offered before doesn't count. And your fasting doesn't count as well, because the menses does not permit you to fast or pray. So what shall you do? You shall enjoy eating and drinking. There is no blame upon you, of course. And what I recommend, those who are in the menses and eating and drinking, you should do that in private. And you should enjoy eating and drinking, okay? But you should not do that in front of the family members. And I know that most women do that, but this is just as a reminder. Another question from one sister: does breastfeeding consider an act that voids fasting? No. Excreting the milk and breastfeeding does not invalidate fasting whatsoever. Okay, another sister says that, what is the best way to take advantage of the time while I'm doing the homework, ironing the clothes, doing the laundry, cooking, cleaning up the house while fasting? You know, there are a lot of things which the person can do. They are perceived as great acts of worship while you are doing the physical work, the physical activities, because they only require your heart to be attentive and your tongue to be busy. Al-dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, كل تسبيحة صدقة, كل تهليلة صدقة, كل تكبيرة صدقة. Each time you say subhanallah, this is an act of charity from you. Each time you do alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, likewise. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam have specifically made mention of some of the adhkar which are very easy to repeat. They are very dear to the hearts of the person and also to Allah the Almighty. When he says كلمتان ثقيلتان في الميزان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن خفيفتان على اللسان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم, 2 words which are heavy in the scale of the good deeds, and they are very light on the tongue, خفيفتان على اللسان, but rather they are heavy in the scale of the good deeds. حبيبتان إلى الرحمن, and they are very dear to the most beneficent, Allah the Almighty, is to say Subhanallah wa bihamdi, Subhanallah al-Azim, glory be to Allah and all praise be to Him, glory be to Allah the Great, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim. In another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, whosoever says once Subhanallah al-Azim wa bihamdi, it's like a combination of both, glory be to Allah the Great and all praise be to Him, Allah will plant for him a date palm tree in paradise. How many times I can do that while vacuuming, while doing the laundry, while doing the dishes, while cooking? You know, you can take advantage of doing this kind of work and keep busy reciting your adhkar. If you have memorized Quran, recite what you have memorized. We say also to the drivers, or while driving back and forth to work, recite what you have memorized, and this is also another great mean of revising your memorization. If not, then play the Quran audio. And my advice to those who do not know Arabic, to play the Quran, the audio Quran, and also download the interpretation of the meaning of what they hear. So it will help them to focus more, not just to keep something playing in the background. In fact, brothers and sisters, reading the Quran, for each one letter you get 10 good deeds, as we have discussed before in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And similarly, listening to the Quran, it gives you the same reward of reading the Quran, provided you are paying attention to what is being recited. فَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. So the person must listen and listen attentively in order to be eligible for Allah's mercy. We have discussed in the previous episodes how the Prophet ﷺ says, لِلصَّائِمِ عِنْدَ فِطْرِهِ دَعْوَةٌ لَا تُرَدْ. For each fasting person at the time of breaking their fast, a dua which shall not be rejected, would be always accepted and delivered. And in another hadith, there are 3 types of people whose dua shall be accepted. One of them is الصائم حتى يفطر. So long as you're fasting from dawn until sunset. So you have all the time, while cooking, while fixing your house, while doing any physical work, even a mechanic in his shop, a driver, any person who doesn't have to focus on a mental work, can keep busy with making dua. So istighfar, adhkar, making dua, making tasbih. Making dua is a privilege that many of us are negligent of. We sometimes remember to make dua only whenever we are experiencing hardship or difficulty, while making dua is actually one of the most superior acts of worship. In the sound hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ad-du'a'u huwa al-ibadah." Sometimes while working you hear the adhan. If you're a woman, you don't have to go to the masjid to attend the prayer. As a matter of fact, praying at home is better for you. But repeating after the muazzin, this is prescribed for both men and women. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man qala حينما يسمع النداء." So whoever says after hearing the adhan, اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته حلت له شفاعتي يوم القيامة. He will be eligible for my intercession on the day of judgment. You hear the nida, the adhan 5 times a day. Especially the Prophet ﷺ said, إذا سمعتم المؤذن فقولوا مثل ما يقول. When you hear the muazzin, repeat after him. He says, Allahu Akbar, you say Allahu Akbar. Until he says, حي على الصلاة and حي على الفلاح, you say, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. After each time he says so. So after the muazzin, you repeat, you say the beautiful dua, you earn that much thawab, you will be eligible for Allah's mercy, for the Prophet's intercession. There is a lot of things, there are a lot of things the person can do if you are working at home. We call the woman who is staying at home, working at home, a house engineer, because she's doing a lot of work and a great job. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us. The following question from one brother who says that after having an intimate relationship with my wife at night and an hour before Ramadan, before the fasting begins, we didn't perform ghusl immediately. As a matter of fact, we took a little nap so that we woke up after the adhan. Would that invalidate or affect our fasting, and what are we supposed to do? I have mentioned earlier that performing ghusl to lift the major impurity is not one of the conditions of the validity of fasting. What is condition for fasting is that to be present, to be healthy, and women should not have their menses. But if a couple have intimate relationship and they encounter sexual discharge and they slept together, and after the adhan they woke up, now you gotta perform ghusl, not for fasting, but in order to pray Fajr on time. Otherwise, as long as you intended to fast beforehand, your fasting is valid and you should resume fasting. The following question is concerning covering the feet of women in the prayer. Generally speaking, brothers and sisters, women should cover more than men, obviously, in the prayer and outside the prayer. In the prayer for women, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يقبل الله صلاة حائض إلا بخمار. Allah doesn't accept the prayer of a ha'id, and we have to be careful because sometimes giving the literal translation is very confusing. It's very confusing. So maybe you get the Google translator and you translate this hadith as follows. Allah wouldn't accept the prayer of a menstruated woman without a veil. You say, well, I thought that women during their menses are not allowed to pray, and furthermore they don't have to make up the missed prayer. That is true. But the hadith says, Salat ha'id, a menstruated woman offering the prayer. Okay. The meaning of that, the word ha'id, that a woman who have attained the age of puberty, and that is very commonly known for women by simply experiencing the menses. Because before attaining the age of puberty, the prayer is recommended. It's not mandatory. The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, رُفِعَ الْقَلَمُ عَنْ ثَلَاثٍ. The pen which records our actions does not record the actions of three categories. One of them is الصَّبِي, the child, he or she, until they attain the age of puberty. For girls, once the girl experiences the menses, this is the most prominent sign that she is now baligha. So yesterday she used to pray voluntarily. Now the prayer has become obligatory. Yesterday she was not wearing full hijab. Why? Because she was a little child. Today, and after experiencing the menses, she has become mature enough. She's addressed like all adults. So she must wear hijab in the prayer and outside the prayer. So when the Prophet ﷺ says, لا يقبل الله صلاة حائض إلا بخمار, it means Allah will not accept the prayer of a grown-up woman, a mature woman, who have reached the age of puberty without wearing the khimar. What is the khimar? The khimar is explained in the ayah, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ. So to lower their khimar. Al-khimar is the sitr, the veil, which covers from the head and down. From the head and down. In the prayer, women shouldn't cover their faces and their hands. So the khimar is the common scarf that women wear from head and it goes down. Then in another hadith, Salama, one of the mothers of the believers, radiyallahu anha, was asked, عن المرأة تصلي في خمار وقميص. She asked the Prophet ﷺ also. And the answer was, it's okay as long as the dir' is sabigh, it covers the feet. Okay? So sometimes a woman doesn't have but the khimar, the scarf, and a aba'ah, doesn't have a skirt or an izar. Well, the Prophet ﷺ said, if what she's wearing is long enough to cover the feet, it is okay. What does it mean? Well, according to the diversion meaning in the principles of jurisprudence, that woman shouldn't show her feet in the prayer. So whether you wear socks and whether you're wearing long gown or long garment that is covering the feet, that will do it, insha'Allah. And this is according to the more right view, because there is a difference of opinion in this regard. Brothers and sisters, may Allah the Almighty guide us to what is best and accept our good deeds, pardon us and forgive us our sins. By that we've come to the end of today's edition of your program Fatawa, and until next episode, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.